Viewers like you. It's not just TV, it's Hawaiian cultural connections. PBS Hawaii, home is here.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaii are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and the Pacific since 1857, making a positive difference in the communities where we live and work. In August, police arrested a Waianae man for killing his neighbor, who he says stormed onto his property and shot 5 people. No charges will be brought in this case, but many were wondering why the man was arrested after he claimed self-defense. The incident has sparked discussions on what is considered self-defense in Hawaii and if our current law should be strengthened. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Lauren Day. The recent mass shooting in Waianae has brought the state's self-defense law to the forefront. It states the use of force upon or toward another person is justifiable when the actor believes that such force is immediately necessary for the purpose of protecting himself against the use of unlawful force by the other person on the present occasion. That self-protection is justified against the threat of death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, rape, or forcible sodomy. However, use of deadly force is not justified if it can be avoided with complete safety by retreating or by surrendering possession of a thing to a person asserting a claim of right thereto, or by complying with a demand that he abstain from any action which he has no duty to take. Our panel tonight will discuss our current law for engagement and if it should or should not be changed. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. As a reminder, you can email or call in your questions, and you will find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii YouTube page. Now to our guests in studio. Steve Alm is the prosecuting attorney for the City and County of Honolulu. He was first elected to the position in 2020. Prior to that, he served as a circuit court judge for 15 years, presiding at more than 200 jury trials. Samantha DeCorte is the Republican senator-elect for District 22 on Oahu. She will be representing constituents in Ko'olina, Nānākuli, Maili, Waianae, Mākaha, and Makua. Kevin O'Grady is a practicing attorney focusing on criminal defense, DUI defense, and civil rights litigation. He has more than 2 decades of legal experience and is also a member of the United States Army Reserve as a lieutenant colonel judge advocate. We also have Chris Marvin. He is the founder of a strategic communications firm. He served as a U.S. Army officer and Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and he is on the Everytown Veterans Advisory Council, which works to advocate for gun violence prevention here in the United States. Mr. Alma, I want to start with you.
Sure.
2 minutes ago, I read off Hawaii's very small part of Hawaii's self-defense law. A lot of legal jargon in there. Can you simplify it for the average Joe like myself? When is the use of force justified, and when is the use of deadly force not justified?
Okay, and I think we should focus on deadly force. And if somebody is using deadly force against you, you have the right to use deadly force against them. If it's out in public, if you can retreat and not engage safely, you're expected to do that. If you can't, like if somebody's holding you up in a robbery, you have the right to use deadly force again. The 2 really important exceptions are if you're in your home, which is sometimes called the castle doctrine, you shouldn't have to retreat anywhere, you're in your home, or if you're at your place of work, you don't have to retreat and you can use deadly force right there. So out in public, you're expected to retreat if you can do that with, safely. Otherwise, deadly force can be used.
Kevin O'Grady, can you chime in a court of law, how do you prove whether or not someone was able to retreat safely?
So that's going to be something that I think falls actually upon the prosecutor's lane, because once a person who is arrested for using deadly force raises some evidence of being able to use self-defense in a justified manner, then the prosecution must disprove that. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt, I believe, is the standard that they have to do. So, and the language that Mr. Am was just talking about and which you talked about, there's some specific words in there. The statute actually says that if you know you can retreat and be in complete safety. And that's a very high standard, and I'm not sure that somebody who encounters a situation out in public where they have to suddenly decide to use deadly force and whether or not it's reasonable should be trying to think about, well, is there a small chance? Do I know that I can completely avoid this situation? That's what the statute requires, is that you know you can completely avoid the use of deadly force. Then you must retreat, and so, or surrender the item, whichever. So I think that the burden falls upon the prosecution. The question is whether or not you would have that burden to even think about that, because at its base, here it's a reasonable use of deadly force under the circumstances. All of the legal jargon that you're talking about, which is separated out through a couple different statutes, it's going to be, were you reasonable in your use of deadly force? And that is going to be partly based upon whether or not you're expecting deadly force in the first place. So if somebody threatens you, for example, with deadly force.
I want to go around the table and hear where each of you stand on Hawaii's self-defense law. So maybe Chris, I'll start with you, and then we'll make it back around to Mr. Alm over here.
Yeah, I think that the laws on the books are sufficient for what we want as a community. Like we said, there is no reason that you can't defend yourself against deadly force in any situation. And in your home and work, you have more of an ability to use that deadly force. And we see it work well in recent instances. And so I think that the most important thing is that citizens understand that we have a good law in the books that exists in many states on the mainland that have similar gun safety laws to Hawaii, and that's going to be sufficient, because ultimately we make our laws based on value judgments, right? Like the interpretations and the making of the laws, the interpreting of the laws, that's very difficult, right? And it's a lot of language that everyday citizens don't understand. But our values are, do we want to kill more people or not, right? And so we have a law that allows us to reduce death from deadly force as much as possible in these instances.
Samantha, I'm curious, how do you feel about it, and what are you hearing from your community members, your constituents that you will be representing?
Yeah, so I want to take it back to the moment, that we had discussed earlier about the family that has been in this dispute for years upon years. And, finally it came to a head when one neighbor traveled over to the other neighbor's property and decided to open fire on loved ones and family members. The man that had decided to protect his family by grabbing his legal rifle, or firearm, his legal firearm, to come out and protect his family. If you can imagine being in that moment, I don't know, I've never been in that moment, so I can't speak, but I do know that in that moment, the thing that you want to do the most is protect your family. And here you are watching live your family members and loved one getting shot and killed. Next thing you know, you're getting arrested, getting put in the back of a police car. You're not even sure if you can see your family again. Had we had the Stand Your Ground law in effect, he would have never gotten arrested. And so this is where we really have to start looking at these kinds of areas of stand your ground, because it was very important that we were able to, this was somebody who had a legal firearm. And so I just want to go into it really quick and then we'll pass it through. But in order for you to get a legal firearm, it's quite an extensive process. You have to go to take a course, you have to, get approval through HPD, you have to get a criminal background check, a medical background check. Once you actually do get your firearm, you have to go get that registered through HPD. So this isn't just something that's issued out. So I think that the person that has been vetted to be able to get the firearm should I think that should be able to speak volumes on his ability to make a rational decision in that moment. Now, that entire process just in itself is only to own a firearm. That's not even to carry. That's a whole nother process. So I think throughout that process of getting a legal firearm and issued a legal firearm would cause some kind of ability to say that that person can make a rational decision in the moment.
Kevin O'Grady, do you, since Samantha brought it up, do you feel that we should have a stand your ground law?
So a few items. If the gentleman over in Waianae, I thought he was in his own house. And if he was in his own house, he didn't have a duty to retreat. I think that's what Mr. Alam and I agreed on. So when we're talking out in the public, whether or not you have a duty to retreat, I would disagree with Chris. It's not about saving more lives, or do we want to kill more people or kill fewer people. It's about whether or not you have the right to defend yourself when you're outside, just like you do when you're in your house. And I don't think that that gentleman over there wanted to necessarily kill another human being, but he was forced in a situation where he had to defend himself. And he should have that same right when he's outside of the house to be able to do that. And I think Americans, citizens who have the ability to own and keep and bear arms, and the process here in Hawaii is very, very onerous with regard to owning, and even more so with regard to carrying, which is a completely different subject for another time with regard to how that is limiting a great many people from being able to defend themselves, whether in the house or outside. But I think in response to your question, people should have the ability to defend themselves like they do in their home, outside, without having the duty to retreat, because it doesn't change the base analysis. Because I don't think anybody would kill somebody unless they had to. They would not use deadly force unless they had to. They shouldn't have to go through the extra question in their mind if they're standing outside, can I get away from this? Because if they're obviously thinking about using their firearm, they must think it's necessary at that moment.
Mr. Alma, I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, that terrible situation, with Mr. Silva, with the Silva Dome, the gentleman who returned fire was at home, no duty to retreat. It wouldn't have made any difference with the stand your ground law. And the police and I are on the same page with this. I think our laws work right now. We're blessed with a very low murder rate in Hawaii. It's typically in the mid-20s here on this island. And I think if you're out in the public and somebody is aiming a gun at you, you're going to be able to shoot back because that is deadly force right then. And we would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, even if we ever wanted to charge it, that it wasn't self-defense, as was alluded to. Now, it's a tricky question, what Senator DeCorte brought up about getting arrested. And I think part of it is the police have to try to figure out what happened. They have a guy who's dead, another guy who shot him. They don't know what it is. I hate to heavy up on the media so early in the program, but the headlines are like, it's simple to solve, it was obvious. And yet the police, so I think the police arrested the gentleman. I think he was let go several hours later. And then the case has to come to our office because we're going to make the decision on whether people get charged or not. We looked at all the facts and circumstances, saw it was justified, and so he wasn't charged. People were impatient. They wanted it decided within 24 hours, but often it takes a while. People are used to everything being decided immediately these days, and sometimes it's going to take a little more than that. So that's my take on why the police arrested him. They're just trying to figure out very basically what happened and do some investigation. Then we'll make a decision on whether it was self-defense and thus justified.
Since you mentioned that, and I'll let you guys chime in. I just want to, since we're on the topic, Benny wrote in, and I think you could just clarify for him. He's just asking, will the arrest of the man arrested in Waianae be erased from his record since it was decided that he would not be charged?
Yeah, he should be able to get it expunged.
Perfect.
So a few items. One, I'm going to take the opportunity to join Mr. That the police did need the time, and it's probably correct for them to at least detain and seize everyone at the time so that they can figure everything out. Now, Senator, I think you said that he was not only arrested, I've seen different time periods for how long he was held. Because, yes, ultimately the prosecutor's office is going to have to analyze all the facts after as good of an investigation as they can get so that they can make a charging decision. Should they have seized him? Sure. Secured the weapon? Sure. Placed him in handcuffs? Yes. But how many hours does one have to be held while something, which again, I know the media was saying it was super clear, the prosecutor needs time to make an analysis and determine whether or not to charge people. I don't know that it was necessary once he was disarmed to have held him for so long at the police department. If he's not going anywhere, he could have been perhaps later, they could have issued a warrant or something. I mean, and please join in.
I think it was about 12 hours is my memory of it, and it was long before we made a decision.
Sure.
You know, they're going to do their best quickly. I know it must seem jarring, like the guy, it turned out, was in the right, but they didn't know that in the immediacy of what happened.
Chris, I know you were nodding your head with a few things, wanting to chime in.
Well, I'll take a small privilege as the only non-lawyer, non-lawmaker at the table. This is a bad example for what we're talking about, this shooting in Waianae. It has really almost nothing to do with the stand your ground law because he wasn't in public. If he were in public and he were being shot at or a bulldozer was driving towards him had canisters of fuel or whatever it was, he would have still, under current Hawaii law, been justified in shooting in public. So there is nothing that would have changed, even if he wasn't at home. So why is this the moment that we're using to sort of try to galvanize a movement towards what we call shoot first laws, right? They're called stand your ground laws, but we call them in the gun violence prevention movement shoot first because that's what it is. You shoot first, you ask the questions later. And so to me, there's something behind that, right? There's folks who want these laws out there who are looking at this that has gained so much public attention, right? Like the whole Waianae Coast is talking about this, and not even the Waianae Coast, the whole island, the whole state. It made national news, right? And so mostly probably because of the bulldozer. We're not legislating bulldozers here, right? Maybe we should. But we get into this gun conversation because there's a whole Second Amendment agenda there, and they see a moment to jump on that. But it's actually a really, really poor example for us to have the conversation around shoot first, stand your ground type laws.
If I can take issue with the shoot first, the standard law in place right now in Hawaii says you don't have to wait for the person to shoot. So this characterization of shoot first tries to, it warps how these scenarios go down. If a person is being threatened, they don't have to wait for the person to lunge with a knife. They don't have to wait for the person to shoot first, okay? Sometimes shooting first can be completely justifiable. I think Mr. would agree, it depends upon the circumstances. If it is not justified in the first place, that person will find that out, they will have committed murder, they will be prosecuted. However, there are a variety of situations where you don't have to wait to be raped or robbed or shot or stabbed. You are allowed to shoot first in order to defend yourself and those around you. It is not a Second Amendment agenda. It is a freedom agenda and trying to make people so that they don't have to wait to be victims.
I know, obviously, not everyone's going to agree on the subject. Chris, can I just clarify your stance on it and Everytown Veterans Advisory Council? Do you feel that the stand your ground law, or you were saying shoot first, would result in more unnecessary deaths? Is that what you were saying?
In the states that have, so 29 states have laws like this. You mentioned off the top that that's the majority of states, which is true, but it's not the majority of the American population. Because states like New York, California, Illinois, they don't have these laws. So majority of Americans do not live under a stand your ground regime, right? But the ones that do, after the implementation of these laws, we see a 55% increase in homicide rates. So, I mean, there's nowhere where, if we put in laws that makes it easier for people to shoot other people, there's no reasonable expectation that shootings will go down. Now that's homicide rates. Now remember, that actually takes out the justified ones. So this is people who have seen, oh, I have a stand your ground law, and maybe, as Kevin's pointed out, they're actually not applying it correctly. They do shoot, they don't meet the standard, they end up going to jail for homicide. So those increase by 55%, and gun violence rates generally in all of these states increase when we put these laws in place. And that's something that, you know, Hawaii voters and Hawaii legislators really need to think hard about, is we will see an increase in gun deaths, period. And we don't want that.
Sorry, please.
You know, one thing that I think it is really hard for the public to understand, I think because of social media, is crime is dropping. It's been dropping for 30 years in Hawaii. It's about half of what it was in the 90s. Now, there are more homicides with guns on the west side, without question. But what HPD tries to get across is, in most of the cases, they're not random. That means if you're going to the store, you're going to the beach, you're unlikely to get shot in Waianae or anyone else. Because the shootings, the vast majority, people know each other, or they're related to each other, or it's an interfamilial thing. And so that should make people feel safer. It's hard to explain, you know, that kind of thing to people, but normally there are one or two, you know, murders on the west side, and in the last couple of years, it's been 8, 9. It's actually a little lower this year so far than last year, but there were a couple of totally random things, but mostly it's people that know each other or have disagreements with other groups. But trying to get people, and I think psychologically it's really important as we do more stuff with our office on the west side, we're trying to get the word out there to people that it may seem like crime is out of control. It's actually lower than it was last year, with the exception of the gun cases. And it's been dropping year after year for 30 years here.
Samantha, what are you hearing from folks on the west side as far as what they want done to, you know, help the gun violence issue in their community, or do they want, you know, looser self-defense laws here in Hawaii?
Yeah, I mean, crime is definitely on the rise on the Waianae coast, as Prosecutor has said. And we're seeing different kinds of homicides, different kinds of crimes. Some we're seeing random, some we're seeing in domestic disputes, some we're seeing with people trespassing onto other people's property. So it's really hard at this point to pinpoint where the pattern is on the Waianae coast. So I can't say that it's all random. It's not random. One case in point that I want to mention is Richiana de Guzman, who was caught in the crossfire, and she was walking on a public street, and she was, you know, hit, and she's survived. But we have a lot of random shootings. We also have shootings that are between households and shootings that are in households. So I think the Waianae coast is isolated in what we're experiencing right now. Compared to the state overall, we're definitely in a category of our own. So we need to really ramp up and have all hands on deck.
This is a good comment and question from Mel, one of our viewers. The panel should make the point that we are not just talking about guns in the context of Stand Your Ground. There are other deadly weapons, including our hands. Her question is, if someone is choking me and I feel like he is killing me, can I fight back even if it means that the assailant dies?
I'll let the prosecutor take the first stab.
Convinced, you know, reasonably that you're facing death or serious bodily injury, you can use deadly force. In that situation.
I concur. That's the statute. If you think that you're facing death or serious bodily injury, and so in the case that this person has said she's being choked, I would think that you can take any and all steps necessary to stop that person from choking you.
And if it was, you know, say you go down to Fort Street Mall, and some guy is shooting people, and you come upon it, you're going to have the right to use deadly force and shoot that person, because if he's shooting and hitting people, clearly they couldn't get out of the way, they couldn't retreat. But one thing that always worries me about this is, and you know, the research does show you're going to have more gunfights if you pass a law like this. And law enforcement has a real hard time hitting what they're shooting at, especially if they're moving. I mean, they have this situation with the FBI down in Miami where they and the bad guys shot dozens of bullets at each other and didn't hit each other. The adrenaline that runs in there. So one of my concerns is, and I think the senator points out that the people that are getting, concealed carry are honest, law-abiding people. They're following the rules. They have that. But I don't know if they're going to the range regularly. Are they going to be able to? It's really hard to effectively shoot somebody. And I'm worried that more people, and I haven't seen data on this, whether bystanders, might be more at risk. It seems logical, but it really is hard to shoot somebody. Even the example I gave down in the mall, they better make sure it's not a Hawaii Five-0 being shot, or that it's an undercover police officer trying to shoot some people that were actually killing somebody else. And so you got to be careful if inserting yourself in that situation, which is why in most of these cases on the mainland, most people, even if they're carrying, do not get involved because they're there to protect themselves and their family. They're not out there to be another police officer.
I think what we heard from both of the lawyers here is that our law is relatively sufficient, right? That we have this law on the books that allows you, if it meets a certain standard, to defend yourself, right? So making it more permissive is only going to get more confusing, right? The Hawaii Five-0 scenario. And we know this because we see it on the mainland. And the senator-elect mentioned trespassing, right? There are states on the mainland where if you trespass, you can be shot and killed. That is a death penalty offense, right? In North Carolina, you can shoot through a closed door if you feel like you're in danger. And there was a famous incident where teenagers were lost and they pulled into a driveway to turn around, and the guy from the front porch shot and killed them. Teenagers have been, Congresswoman Lucy McBath's son Jordan was killed for playing his music too loud. Ahmaud Arbery was chased down by people. And we all know Trayvon Martin's story. He wore a hoodie, he got shot and killed. There are people out there who will not just fail to retreat, but will pursue, right? And the data on the mainland also shows that when the shooter is white and the person shot is a person of color, they are 5 times more likely to find it to be a justified shooting, right? So we need to think about that with our population and who's going to be involved here.
So your stance is our laws are fine, leave it as is.
They're sufficient just to defend yourself.
And I did not say that ours were sufficient. What
That's
I
what I
said
heard.
was, what I said was, he said both the lawyers. What I said was the ability to not have to retreat should be extended to outside of the house. And I would seriously disagree with the statistics that he's throwing out. There are states from Florida to Arizona that have seen a reduction in crime and people are carrying concealed all the time. But as Mr. Ahm says, people who carry concealed don't want to necessarily get involved. And I think some of the examples that Chris brought up are people that engaged in crimes and then they were prosecuted for them. And in some cases, they were justified in what they did, the fellow down in Florida. But in other cases, which was some other southern state where the 2 fellows chased him, I believe those 2 individuals are, I think they're serving life sentences. Yeah. So it is possible that somebody armed will commit crimes. It is also entirely possible, which Americans have the right to do, which is they should be out there and they have the ability to defend themselves. If they do it improperly, they'll be prosecuted. But if they don't have the ability, they're going to be a deceased victim.
Very quickly, Ahmaud Arbery, though, is still dead. Even though his killers are in jail, he's dead. His family have lost him because the people thought, given these laws being on the books, that they had the right to execute him. And, I'm a concealed carry permit holder, right? So I walk the talk there too. But the bottom line here is, in the United States, when we look at all of these permissive gun laws coming into play, we are now in a country where the leading cause of death for children and teens is firearms. Just 2 years ago. So crimes going down, this and that. People are dying. More people are dying by guns than ever before in the history of this country, and it's because of more permissive gun laws. Hawaii has an opportunity over and over again to prevent that.
I don't want to get this
to chime in, and then let's move on to a different question.
But a lot of those teenagers are involved in criminal activity. whether they're 15 or they're 18 and 19, which, by the way, are adults. So I don't want this to get into a statistics battle. That's all I needed to say.
You mentioned prosecuting, so I wanted to clarify, Mr. Ong, can you explain how does your office decide whether or not to file charges in a potential self-defense case?
Well, it's all fact-oriented. And that's exemplified by, like, when the police officers shoot and kill a suspect. And since I came in, I was convinced that, you know, if the agency who's involved in the shooting is doing the investigating, people are always going to question it. It's like if one of our investigators, we have 25 investigators in our office, if they shot and killed somebody in the line of duty, we wouldn't investigate it. We'd have HPD investigate it, and maybe the AGs prosecute it. So when we look at an officer-involved shooting, we see was it justified or not? And we were in the midst of a battle with Corp Counsel about fighting that, because there was a case up in Nuances with the South African rugby player. We looked at the facts and circumstances and determined the officers were justified in using deadly force. So and it could be self-defense, it could be defense of others, and for police officers in making a lawful arrest. But it's totally fact-based. Did they have and it's hard for me to think of a situation, you know, like is being brought up about trying to figure out whether you have a safe way out. Because if somebody is coming at you, you know, with a weapon, you're going to be justified in shooting them. I mean, it's not a question, I don't think. And, you know, if it were going to take this, you know, can I do this or not do this, that I'd be very sympathetic toward it. I'm trying to think. And we don't have a lot of cases like that. Like I said, we have a really low murder rate. And so right now, I just don't see the need to change the laws, because I think what we have works. And we would look at it, and if somebody was robbing somebody at gunpoint, that person, I mean, I don't know how you do it. It'd be really chancy, I would think, to try to pull out a gun and shoot the guy who's robbing you at gunpoint. But that would be justified, because there's no way to retreat when somebody's pointing a gun at you. You know, you should be able to defend yourself right away. Now, I'm the prosecutor now. I'll be gone in 4 years. The next prosecutor might have a different opinion about this one way or the other, but that's the way we would look at it now, very fact-based.
Speaking of the laws, this question, I think I can throw it to Senator-elect over here. Eric in Kailua is asking, will this issue come up before the legislature in the next session? Seems worthy of a discussion.
Well, I'll speak for our district primarily. We are focused on really just helping our community to be able to self-protect themselves. As you know, we have a police station that is still unfinished, but we're getting there. But until then, we have a response time from a police station that is outside of our district that takes a while for them to get on the scene. By then, murders are happening, people are getting killed on whatever level that is. So we have to be able to give our community an opportunity to protect themselves. So myself, along with my colleagues that do represent our district, both on the state and the city level, will be pushing legislation this upcoming session to be able to give our community members just that relief and that comfort that they can protect themselves. So we will be collaborating on a companion bill on the 2025 legislative session.
And this question is from Annette. It's related, so I'll just keep, since we're on the topic. Wasn't there a bill introduced in the legislature last session to strengthen our current self-defense law? I believe it did not pass. Can the bill be reintroduced in the next session?
Absolutely. I mean, there were a few bills that were introduced in order to strengthen these sorts of efforts. Most of them, they don't even get a hearing. And so we have had year after year legislators introduce these bills. Either they're killed or they don't even get a hearing. So I think with our collaboration on the city and state level with my colleagues, we'll be able to get, you know, just some kind of traction on it. So absolutely, we will be looking into that, and we will be introducing that.
I know we've.
And if I could add, I'm not a real big fan of mandatory minimums because different situations call for different things, but we're having a real problem with ghost guns and being able to people get in the mail. There's no serial numbers. So it may be appropriate to have some mandatory time for possession of a ghost gun. And part of the challenge is even when there's a shooting, often the police are not able to recover the weapon because who's ever there will grab it and take it away, because we'd like to trace where did the gun come from, how did they get a hold of it. And that's why whenever we talk about gun violence, I really encourage parents to, figure out a way to lock things up or keep it away from your kids, and be as responsible as you can this way, so you don't have kids grabbing dad's gun and going out at 1 o'clock in the morning and getting into trouble. But I think a mandatory sentence for ghost guns may be appropriate. So we'll be working with different community groups on different things.
I think we kind of strayed a little bit here, but homemade firearms or firearms which don't bear serial numbers is a relatively new invention only within basically my lifetime, the 1968 Gun Control Act. There's no reason why anything with a serial number or without a serial number means anything with regard to the criminality of the person who's possessing it. There could be a wide variety of people all across the country that possess firearms that don't have serial numbers that they created themselves. It doesn't mean they're going to murder anybody. The person who has a serialized firearm and he obliterates the number because he murdered somebody with it, that's different. He's destroying evidence after the fact. That's obstruction of justice, okay? So I don't think that the mere possession of a weapon has anything to do with whether or not that weapon is going to be used in a crime. Criminals who aren't supposed to have them in the first place are going to get whatever kind of firearm they want. May they want those because they're less traceable? Yeah, but they're probably not also going to buy them from a dealer because they don't want to be known that they just purchased a firearm. So, but going back to his theory, I'm sorry, not his theory, his statement about how he analyzes whether or not to charge. It was very correct that it's factual. They have to make the determination according to the prosecutorial ethics, and that's fine and that's great. My concern is, after he departs, that the next prosecutor may not feel or may not apply the law in quite the same way, and you're going to have people who might otherwise be defending themselves have to be prosecuted, or there's a choice made to prosecute them. And so that's why changing the law to afford the citizenry the peace of mind that they don't have to retreat, whether they are in their house or out of their house. The analysis is still going to be the same. The prosecutor has to determine, was the deadly force justified under the circumstances, and should we prosecute? But there's one less thing there. They don't have to retreat. They can defend themselves wherever they are.
Chris,
Kevin just said we should pass. He just said we should pass legislation now, because of what a future prosecutor 4 years from now, who is unnamed and unknown, may or may not decide how to interpret the law. I mean, that is not a justification. Like, Mr. Alm's replacement, hypothetical replacement in 4 years, is not the reason that we should legislate today. It is if you're on the side of the gun lobby and you want to sell more guns. And you want more guns in Hawaii because that's more profits for the gun lobby. That was a great reason to do that. The other thing is the ghost guns. I mean, I think, Kevin, you kind of backtracked on your own argument there, because you said, it's okay for people to have ghost guns, guns without serial numbers, homemade guns, guns that come in kits in the mail, and it's okay for them to have them because that doesn't mean they're going to shoot somebody. But you also said that the people who are not allowed to buy guns or prohibited are going to fail background checks at federally licensed firearm dealers, and they have a way around that, and that is ghost guns. And that's why the state worked really hard, the legislature worked really hard to make ghost guns illegal in Hawaii very recently. Before that, they weren't illegal. We had these innovations occur, and the legislation has to catch up, and then the prosecutors have to deal with that. But we have good ghost gun laws in Hawaii now. Now we just have to get rid of the sort of residual ghost guns that are continuing to be used for crimes, because that's the folks who can get their hands on them. So advocating for the idea that anybody should have an unserialized homemade gun, the industry made it so easy. They just put the kits together, right? It isn't like hobbyists. These are people's like, ooh, the quickest way for me to get a gun is to just order one of these kits online, and I'm going to end around the laws. And so Hawaii strengthened that, and we're safer because of it.
But you're punishing all the people who have them, who are not in that category of wanting to
just go buy a gun with a background check. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you don't need the ghost gun. Just go down to a federally licensed firearm dealer, take the background check, and buy your gun.
The Second Amendment is not about need.
I know you
It's about
guys,
a well-trained
I
militia.
know we have opposing views. I want to get to a couple of our viewer questions. It's okay. I know we've been on the topic of gun violence. We will probably come back to it in just a little bit. But we've got a couple viewers asking, we've been talking about self-defense. Not in every scenario is going to be a firearm involved. So I want to switch the topic a little bit. Rick emailed in asking, in a road rage incident where you need to defend yourself because someone is out of the car and coming at you with, this one he mentioned, with a firearm or a knife, can you run him over with your car even though I have a criminal record years earlier?
Wow.
So very specific scenario, but maybe if we can address the topic of
Again, I'll defer
not
to
necessarily
Mr.
firearms.
Well,
to start on that
I mean,
one.
if somebody's coming at you with a gun, you might well be able to run him over, because I don't know if you could safely retreat from that. You could reverse back and he could shoot you as you're trying to reverse back. You know, I think people would be better off not getting into road rage exchanges and not pulling over and not leading to this stuff happening. But I think if somebody has a knife, that might be a different story. If you can roll up your window and leave, I don't,
And
But,
that's exactly
but
what I
if
was
this law
going to say.
passes,
No,
that can happen. The guy threatens you with the knife, but then stops, thinks better of it, gets back in his car. With the law they're proposing, you'll still be able to follow him and shoot him.
No, that changes
Right?
the scenario. Once he gets back in his car, there's no longer the threat. Okay, the only way
He
that
still has
stand your
the
ground
knife.
would work is if he's approaching with a knife, and theoretically, and this is the problem with armchair guessing the next day. Somebody says, well, you could have thrown it in reverse. He only had a knife. And the person instead said, I didn't think about reverse. I was panicked. He was in front of me. I hit him with the car. And so the threat is still there. He's coming at them. He's telling them he's going to kill them. He has a knife or a bat or a piece of rebar or what have you. And if the argument is made later in court, we can see here on the traffic camera, you could have completed with complete safety if you just would have thrown it in reverse. That's why I think the change in the law needs to happen now.
Michael and Kailo is asking, can you use deadly force if someone is breaking into your home?
There are specifics with regard to that as well, and that's in the statute. I think that, I don't have it memorized, but there's a provision in the statute if they're committing robbery or something else in the home, felonious or felony criminal property damage. I would have to look it up. There are specific provisions if somebody's breaking into your house, just merely breaking into your house without, say, they have a bat and they're threatening, or they got to your bedroom or something. If they've just broken into some outer portion of your house, the statutes provide that in certain circumstances, if there's some other crime that is specified in the statutes, then it could be justified, but I think there's still an overarching, the justification statutes say it has to be justified under the circumstances, and there has to be no lesser way to prevent whatever that other crime is. I think I'm...
And if you're in your home, I mean, the law is going to look at it differently. And I know, and that's part of the problem in talking about this, that around the country, there are all sorts of places. I mean, they would consider us not an old thing because we also have an exception for workplace. And I think some places have an exception for a car, and then some places have total exceptions. And the reason, what I'm concerned about is just looking at the data, states that have stand your ground laws have more gunfights. That just is happening. And I don't think we need to do that. I don't think that would be healthy for the Waianae Coast or anywhere else to have more gunfights. Because truly, if somebody's coming at you with a gun or a knife, you can defend yourself. And that's, if it's right there. But it's so fact specific, we have to look at, each case individually.
Yeah, and because it's so fact specific, as you both had shared, that's the part that really brings an uneasiness to my community, is because we don't necessarily have all the laws memorized. We can't think in that moment, wait, am I at work? Am I at home? Am I at the grocery store? Am I picking up my kid? Am I in my car? Oh, I'm using my dad's car today. So I think in that moment, it's difficult for us to really take a step back to just think, oh, what are the laws here because I'm at work. I'll give you an example. In the beginning of the year, we had a rancher that was shot and killed on his property because of poachers that trespassed. Now, the poachers, I'm not sure if they intended that day that they were going to kill somebody. Maybe they were just wanting to hunt. I'm not exactly sure. But what ended up happening is the rancher confronted, told them get off, and a gunfire broke out, and that rancher was shot and killed. So these are the kinds of issues that my community feels uneasy, they feel unsafe, and this is where helping them to be able to protect themselves would give them some sort of peace of mind to know that this part of the process is actually going to be helping them to protect themselves. So I'll say that.
Now we've been talking about Hawaii self-defense law, but maybe we can kind of all chime in on the discussion of what needs to be done to prevent gun violence. Earlier this year, the Surgeon General declared firearm violence in America a public health crisis. So I'm curious if the four of you feel that that's a fair assessment, and what can we do as a country to make it a little bit better? Chris, do you want to start? I know your organization, this is something that you all work towards.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the Surgeon General is leading edge on this, right? Just like, we remember growing up all the Surgeon General warnings on smoking, right? Like they start to look at, something that is a health crisis for American citizens, and they have to call it out. And I think that that's really important. I mean, I mentioned it before. It is the leading cause of death among children and teens. Kevin would tell you this because all those teens are criminals. Actually, it's suicides, it's accidental deaths, and it's bringing guns to school. But nonetheless, it's for the first time ever the leading cause of death of children and teens, and so that's the crisis. If our keiki are dying by guns, that is a crisis.
Samantha, how does your community and yourself feel about it?
Yeah, and I think I'm always going to bring a more heightened response to these types of discussions because of the district that I represent. Had there been a different senator in a different district, maybe you would have a different response. But I'm always going to I'm always going to stand behind our community and them wanting to defend and protect themselves, and so that's pretty much where I stand on it.
Before I go to Kevin and Mr. Alm here, I want to chime in because Raymond, one of our viewers, wrote in about this. It's a comment, and I think it's good to say right after you, Samantha. There has been a lot mentioned tonight about crime on the West Side. Can we please make the point emphatically that most of us who live on the West Side are law-abiding, nice people like there are everywhere else in Hawaii? We have bad apples, yes, but in that area we are not unique. I don't know if you want to add anything onto that, but I think that it is a nice comment to make that we should point out.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of negative narratives out there, and media tends to pick up on those negative narratives. I mean, if they were to actually highlight the positive things that are coming out of our community, I think that would reframe the stereotype that's coming out of the Waianae Coast. But for right now, that's what the media is pushing out. We know the people that we live next to, and we know that there are tons of great people on the Waianae Coast, and we're doing very innovative things, but I don't want to neglect the fact that we are lacking in resources on the Waianae Coast. Case in point, an uncompleted police station that since 2017 has not been completed yet. I'll say that. We have one of the lowest amount of districts for patrol areas in our community. With crime that's on the rise, we should be having blue lights up and down the street constantly. So as far as his comment, I absolutely agree, but I don't want to be dismissive and neglect the opportunity to be able to make sure that state is on it, city is on it, federal is on it, to make sure we get the resources, that we are in a safe community and we don't have to keep watching our backs.
Mr. O'Grady, do you feel that it's a public health crisis?
No, and it is not something that the Surgeon General should be opining on. This is a matter of values. There are a lot of good people on the West Side. There are a lot of good people in the entire state of Hawaii. Any gun violence that you see in the way of crime is going to be committed by people who already have that in their mindset. Now, what we need to do, and I don't claim to be a politician with all the answers, but this comes down to family values. There are people that can be raised with firearms. Their parents teach them how to use them because they are tools. They secure them. There are 13-year-olds that know how to use firearms and they know not to use them in a criminal fashion. In this country, Since the founding of the country, we have always had firearms in our houses. It's a matter of not using them to do criminal purposes. And whether you use a firearm or a knife, or you just attack somebody because that's the way you resolve things, that's the people that are the problem. It's not the tool. So there are a lot of good people on the west side, and whether 20 more people tomorrow bought firearms or nobody isn't going to make a difference, because the same people that are causing the problems out there, they're going to be the ones causing the problems.
You know, I think when you look, you can go to HPD's website and look, and one of the fascinating things I saw was there's even a little bit more crime when you add property crime to violent crime in East Honolulu than there is in the west side. And it's just that the last couple of years you've had more gun violence. So what they need, I think, would really help would be school resource officers at the 2 high schools and 2 middle schools. They could stop so many things. That the major in that area, Beckley, who's really good, they had 500 calls to the schools for things that probably could be resolved there. Most of the people on the Waianae Coast are honest, hardworking. It's a few people that are giving it a bad name. But I think there have to be efforts to work with young people about solving disputes without going to a gun. And we've had a number of cases, we've waived juveniles to be tried as adults because instead of fighting with their fists and stuff, it immediately goes to the guns. And that's something in the last few years. Before that, there really were only a couple of, everyone is hurtful, but a couple of homicides on the west side. And in the last couple of years, that number has really gone up. And there are really good violence prevention programs around the country we're looking at. We want to work with the elected officials there. But that often means getting young people who may have gotten in trouble themselves out in the community, talking to the young people, talking to the groups, talking to the gang wannabes about solving problems before it gets to be shooting.
Speaking of solving problems, Chris, I do want to give you a minute to talk a little bit about Everytown Veterans Advisory Council. What do you guys do to try and prevent gun violence? Tell us a little bit about the work.
We have so I actually lead a Veteran Advisory Council for Everytown for gun safety across the whole country. And we have about 36 veterans in many states who are dedicated to the idea that in the military we learned about training, safety, and accountability when it comes to guns, and we're looking for that same training, safety, and accountability in our civilian gun laws and gun culture. And so we work with the nation's largest gun violence prevention organization to try to bring some of that common sense, the common sense gun familiarity that we have from the military. We believe that people who come from a profession of arms can speak a little more intelligently about these weapons that they've used. So.
With just a couple minutes left, I want to read off 2 comments because I think it speaks to what we're doing here tonight on Insights. Edward wrote in, "We need more shows like this that foster discussion and help educate us on our laws. Thank you for doing this." And Tina said, "Public education on these issues seems to be lacking. We need more outreach to help us understand how our laws work." I wanted to read those off because it leads into this other viewer's question, not just to pat ourselves on the back here at PBS for giving an hour for this type of discussion. And I'm curious to quickly hear everybody weigh in on it. Would public outreach on what is allowed and what is not help? It seems like it should. Laws are difficult to understand in the way they are written, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Most of us are not attorneys. How do we make people understand? That is from Annie. So before we go, I would love to hear, do you guys think that this is something that needs more public outreach, needs more education?
Well, I'll say yes. I mean, education and knowledge is always the best tool to keep our community well informed. So I think that's always a good thing. It's always a good tool. And what I will say about our coast and our district is that in our efforts for our community, we have all hands on deck. We have churches that are involved. We have schools, teachers, kupunas. We have our lawmakers. I mean, everybody's really chipping in to make sure that we really make that connection from the ground up. So absolutely to the education part.
What about from the attorney perspective? Do you think that there needs to be more education on our laws and even more maybe outreach just to clarify them?
I think so. And one of the things we're trying to do with our office is have a few of the deputies, they're going out and working with the schools right now and meeting with the kids that are truant already. They've missed 20 days of school in the first quarter, right end of the first quarter. They are headed to be booted out. So it's meeting with them, trying to talk to them. A lot of them are discouraged, attitudes aren't great, but trying to show them that if you graduate from high school, you're going to make more money in your life. Our deputies are really good because they talk about their family histories. They grew up in houses with weapons. They grew up in families with drugs. And it's just trying to connect with the kids. And I think a lot of efforts, and I appreciate all the efforts that the public officials are doing, whether it's on the west side or anywhere else on the island. But the more people can understand, that's a really tough thing to try to get people to understand the laws. But I think the more of that we can do, the better.
With just 1 minute left, Kevin, anything you wanted to add on that? Do you think we need more public outreach as far as letting people know about our laws and kind of clarifying it?
Yes, again, I agree with the senator. More education is always a good thing, but I think that it doesn't necessarily have to flow from government. There are private organizations, there are all sorts of organizations with regard to firearms specifically that will help you understand how to use them as tools and the legal implications for them. It doesn't necessarily flow from the government. And I agree with the senator. What we need is families and communities, because it's families and communities that will help those people learn not to use their fists, not to use knives, not to commit crimes. And as the prosecutor said, Mr. Ahm said, to stay in school. If these kids are already going down there, I mean, school resource officers and prosecutors are great. Where's the family of these kids who have missed a month of school already?
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming out. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much to all of our guests tuning in, for sending in the questions. Here in studio, we want to thank Honolulu Prosecutor Steve Alm and Attorney Kevin O'Grady. Also, Senator-elect Samantha DeCorte and Chris Marvin of the Everytown Veterans Advisory Council. Next week on Insights, a growing number of states and schools are banning or restricting cell phones in the classroom. We'll discuss what the rules are in Hawaii and how some schools are enforcing an outright ban. Please join us then. I'm Lauren Day for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Have a great night.
Local broadcasts of Insights on PBS Hawaii are made possible by the support of viewers like you. Mahalo, and by Carl Smith Ball, providing legal services throughout Hawaii and